direction.
I thought you were going to do that.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Oh, we changed that. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Steve Horowitz. I used to be chair of the IASIG back in the day. I am a composer. I'm the audio director for Nickelodeon Digital. And I also teach in the music department at San Francisco State University. I also help along with Scott Looney as the co-founder of the Game Audio Institute, where we develop materials for inside of Unity, which are basically game lessons, which are game-based learning. So people can actually work inside of Unity, audio designers with their own music, sound effects, and voiceover, and actually integrate those into actual games.
Nice. Steve. Hi everyone, I'm Janine Cowan. I teach at Berklee College of Music, both at the online and in residence, both in Boston and Valencia, Spain. And I've been a composer and a sound designer for over 30 years, working in film as I started, but eventually moving into games in the mid-90s. And I really do believe that this is a golden opportunity for great creative sound designers and musicians to have a unique voice. We're seeing that music and sound is still continuing to take on more interest in the industry. So I think it's a great time to be thinking about being in games.
Hello there, my name is Leonard Paul. I run the School of Video Game Audio. It's an online school teaching people from around the world video game audio. And I've done that since 2012. Before that, I was at the Vancouver Film School. I developed the game audio curriculum there. Before that, I started in video games actually as a coder back in the mid-90s, and I focus on composition these days, so I also compose for film, and I also do sound design, and yeah, basically the idea with my approach to working within the industry these days is to both continue to work on indie games, and then to continue to share my knowledge in composition, sound design, and coding with people online so that they can learn from the comfort of their own home.
My name is Robert Brock. I'm the Director of Education at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. We're an audio production trade school based in Phoenix. I've been an educator there since 1992, and what's relevant to this particular discussion is back in 2007, we started teaching with Audio Kinetics Wise, implementing game audio as part of our core program. And then a number of years ago, as Audio Kinetic wanted to create an official certification program, we authored their content. So the 100 level, 200 level certifications from Audio Kinetic we design, and then kind of on the side, I also serve as a mentor trainer for Audio Kinetic, training trainers to become WISE certified instructors.
Awesome. So everyone up here has at one point developed curriculum for game audio and has taught game audio in one realm or another. So over the years, I'm wondering what you guys have noticed has changed about the game audio education world. And this can go to anybody. I'm not going to ask any questions to any specific people. Yeah, go ahead.
I can feel that one. One of the biggest things for me that I've seen is I compare it to something like jazz studies. 30 years ago, the idea of teaching jazz in college was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, right? Now every school has a jazz program, and that's what I'm seeing with game curriculum and game education. I really do firmly believe that within the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, most schools are to have one class or two classes now, and you'll see full programs are cropping up. And actually, we're working towards a degree program at San Francisco State, so you can come out and get a 4-year liberal arts education, and then with an emphasis in scoring for games and sound design for games. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have some things to say about that.
Do it.
So, gosh, in the 90s, I had students coming to me saying, hey, can we do like audio for video games? Isn't that a thing? And I'm like, yeah, it sure is. And then I think it was early 2000s, I went to a game studio in Phoenix. It was Rainbow, and they did a lot of THQ Studio that does racing titles. And I had the audio lead there show me their workflow. And I looked at that and I said, that's crazy. It's like, oh my God, if you just want to turn down the volume of something, you actually have to type, You know, there's no fader. There's nothing that looks remotely similar to anything that I had a background in. I came out of live sound and studio recording, music production, even post-production. And I'm like, this looks like nothing like anything I've ever seen before. And so, but you're telling me if I learn how to do this, that I could like go someplace and then implement sounds into a game. He's like, no, because everything that I just showed you is all proprietary to this studio. And I'm like, this is impossible. There's absolutely no way that we can bring a curriculum into our program because, yeah, I mean, we could talk conceptually about how it works, but there's no immediate skill that I can have somebody learn, like a hands-on skill that would allow them to go in and start working somewhere. And our school is completely geared around hands-on education. And so the biggest change, I think, is now that we have tools, middleware tools, you know, that have become adopted heavily in the industry, this now creates that ability to have educators say there's enough critical mass there with that to say, I want to put the time and effort into creating a curriculum. It takes an immense amount of time to develop curriculum. And if you're going to do it for something that only a handful of people could ever utilize, you're not going to bother. But when now there's these tools that have become ubiquitous, it's like, okay, I'll put my heart and soul into something like that because I now know that it can reach people. And that for me was the biggest change. As we got into the late 2000s, 2007, 2008, 2009, the middleware tools start coming into play. And the critical thing then is the adoption by the games themselves. You know, if that hadn't happened, if middleware wasn't going anywhere and games weren't being done with these tools, then we wouldn't have bothered either. But now we have that, and so now we have educators, you know, across the board. They're saying, okay, I can teach you this, whether it be, you know, in something like an online delivery or in a 4-year degree program or at a technical trade school. You know, just like Steve mentioned, it's like, you know, we're ripe now for this all occurring, and it's something that, you know, it's not like this is new. I think we're kind of at the top of the bell curve we're approaching the peak of that bell curve of the kind of curriculum being developed by schools and by the manufacturers themselves. It's been awesome. Yeah.
I'll grab that one as well, because what you're saying about going to an actual game studio is totally true. So I came from working at Electronic Arts, doing game audio tools, and so when I was asked to teach, it was in 2001, this was before WISE, back in the days and all that, and so it was the same thing. And everything was proprietary. EA was doing some amazing stuff back then. It was like Orca and Ames, I believe. And so what I did is that I rebuilt bits and pieces in pure data, and then I taught my students that. And so I have students from that early when I was teaching them using that tool that are like working at like BioWare and stuff like that. So I tried to get in there early, but now it's so much easier because all these tools are free. And that's a huge thing that has just changed within the last few years. It's a massive like ground shift. It's just like, and it allows you, instead of going like, oh, I wish that I could show students Unreal, you know, you can actually just download it and use it. So this is something that has changed massively just in the last 5 years or so, where all the tool sets are free now. So it has just allowed us an amazing amount of leeway to actually show you exactly what you would be doing when you're working professionally. And then also a massive shift is just the whole indie space. Because back in the days, like, you know, Atari and stuff like that, those teams were actually like indie games. Like they're 5 or like one coder and maybe another person and then a marketing team. And yeah, it's interesting to see how things have shifted and gotten bigger. And then now we have this whole indie game space that's awesome. And then also the game jam space as well, which is a great way for students to get started. So to me, those are really exciting with all this online potential as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, I think that the tools, you know, that marks a very big difference because we don't have to teach something that we know they're not going to see when they get out there, because now the tools are such that, just like we can say that, I like to say that I'm DAW agnostic. Whatever my client is using, that's what I'm going to use. If they're using Pro Tools, great. If they're using Studio One, which I had never seen forever, and I had to work on a few months ago, because it's all about concepts. And I think that's been the difference in education. There is still a technical friction. It is still very difficult. Like, there are still concepts that are technical in nature that you have to understand as a student, but you very quickly can get past that technicality and be able to be more creative. So the tools that we're getting from companies like Audio Kinetic and FMOD and even just Unity and Unreal, like the tool blueprints, like the stuff that we have available to us really lets us. Technology has always been throughout time has been about getting past the technology. That's what I tell my students. I want you to understand the technology so then it can fall away. And we are really there now that once you do the hard work to understand it, you can stop thinking about it and just create.
Yeah, I thought the point of technology was just to put people out of work. I thought that was it. One thing I would just add to this, if I could, is that just for people who are in the crowd who are new to sort of the game space and the education space, is that I would never tell a student in my classroom that you have to be a programmer to work in games, right? It's a big tent, and it's not one discipline, it's a multidisciplined team sport. So, if you just love doing sound design, there's a place for you to just do sound design. If you just love writing music, you can write music. If you are interested in the implementation side, there's tons of that to be done. If you maybe took a computer science course and learned a little bit about programming, that's not gonna hurt, right? And all of these are practical skills that you can bring. So it's a big open field.
Yeah.
How many people are here are students and how many are educators?
How many people here are students? How many people are educators? And how many people are part of the business, just want to learn more?
Okay.
Awesome.
Good mix.
Mix.
Cool. It's mostly my students over there. From San Francisco State, stand up, represent.
I think you have the home court advantage.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
They walk from
Oh,
across the street.
that was one of my students.
Yeah.
What's
I
that?
said that was one of my students.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
So I'm wondering, so the technology to do game audio is a bit more ubiquitous than it used to be. How about gaining the knowledge to use those things? YouTube is full of tutorials. Some are good, some are bad. Where should someone go to get a good education?
Well, so when I was at the previous panel with Sam Marshall, which is a Berkeley grad who I love, the gentleman behind me was talking about this very issue that, why go to a school or study formally when you can just go to YouTube or grab a book, whatever. And our job is not that much different than a history professor or a mathematics professor. All the content is out in the world, but what you get when you come to a program is you get the context. And especially in games, which is highly collaborative, you start to learn how to work with other people. So yes, I will say, without question, every assignment that I give, probably every single one of my students after my lecture, they go to YouTube to look up something that didn't quite connect with them. I do lecture capture and the whole thing, but I'm just one professor. And so YouTube is a nice addition, I think, to where you can get information. It's like even teaching in Unity, when I was studying programming, I couldn't go to a site, the internet didn't exist. I couldn't look up code, and I didn't have anything to emulate. So I think that I see those as a big bonus. Now, we curate, so as we were talking about topics, the other thing that we do as kind of experts in the field is we try to curate what experiences the students should go to. Because when I give an assignment and they come back with a particular solution, I'm like, oh, you went to that site, and they're wrong. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to talk first?
No, go.
Okay, yeah. The thing that I notice a lot with people that are looking for help with the school that I work with is that you have people that are really good that they can just learn it all on their own, and that's fine. And so I have, there's lots of online forums, and same thing with that discussion of like, why would I go to school? It's just like, well, that is the question. Just like, dig into that question. And there's not just one answer, but I mean, a lot of people, they just need a little bit of help. And so that's what I'm trying to provide, and I think all of us are trying to provide, where you're just, there are certain personality types, and I hope that this helps, diversify the industry. Because like, we were saying, you don't need to be a coder these days to get into the industry, and that's a good thing. That just makes things more diverse. You have more balanced teams, which means you produce more interesting games. which feeds back into having more interesting people play those games. And, you know, people going like, wow, I didn't know this is a game. You know, like there's so many new things that we have available to us now. And I think a lot of that is where if you basically empower people, give them the knowledge and, you know, like curate and focus what, you know, they're good at as educators, then yeah, that will develop a whole new ecosystem of what's possible with like interactive entertainment. So yeah, that's what I find really exciting is people that are sort of on those fringes, and then you just give them a little nudge and then they're off to the races. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, and he might be here in the audience, so I don't want to embarrass anybody, but so I'll speak in generalities. But we've had, so at San Francisco State, we have students that come from all over, from different parts of the school, and we'll have students that come from not the music program or not from the production audio side, and, you know, do amazing stuff, right? And actually go much further and much farther. So I think all of that is really true. And, you know, I'm just taken back to, I don't know how many people in here like Frank Zappa, but I like Frank Zappa a lot. From when I was a kid, Zappa was like, he's like, why would you go to school? Just read a book, right? I don't have to go to music school. Like, if I want to learn how to harmony, I'll just go, you know, get Hinneman's book on harmony. You know, it's like, I don't need to go to school to do that. And so I was very much a self-starter and a self-learner for a really long time. And then I finally went to music school at Cal Arts, and I was like, boom, like my head exploded. So you can do a lot on your own, an awful lot. Yeah, you don't need us.
Way to sell it.
Yeah, way to sell it. You know,
Class dismissed.
so education is as diverse as the people that are the learners, you know, and so there's all different kinds of educational materials, approaches, and every person, every one of you out there has a different method in how you need to be taught. And that's what I like about where we're at right now with game audio, is because we have diversity in education. We have lots of different options, you know, from traditional four-year schools to very just mentor-based kind of programs like Leonard has here, to, hey, you know, I'm just going to go on a website and watch YouTube videos, you know, and, you know, I can't tell you how many people I had come up to me at the show. It's like, you're the guy in the videos, you know, and that have never taken any of the certification courses or anything like that. They just simply did it through the videos. And so there's not any one right way. What I do believe is that once you find what is your initial core way of learning, then you should explore other avenues as well to get education, because I think you start picking up a lot more from those other methods. So for example, you know, one of the things you talk about is curation. You know, the curation process of what's right, what's wrong, what's a good educational approach, what's one that is actually more distracting than it is helpful, is really important. And so if you don't have the ability to figure that out on your own, then that you can end up burning a huge amount of time. And so some people just need that focused, guided process moving through, especially when you're first beginning. You know, how many of you have ever integrated sound into a video game, for example? Yeah. How many of you have never done that before and you're just trying to figure out what this is all about? Having somebody that knows what they're doing and knows how to, not just know what they're doing, but knows how to teach to you how to do this, can save you, I kid you not, months in your educational process. You know, I'll show people, I'm, you know, at the Audio Kinetic booth, and I can't tell you how many times I've shown them the very first chapter of Audio Kinetic certification material, and they're just like, oh my God, I could do this, you know. But just before that, they're like, oh, I've been looking at this for a while, and man, I just can't wrap my head around it. And it's like, what do they mean by, you know? And once you have that, for some people, then now they can go to those YouTube videos, and then bam, 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 bam. And it's the exact flip of that. You know, you can go out and watch a bunch of videos, and you can maybe get the concepts of what's going on, but sometimes being in that classroom environment with somebody who really knows what's going on can solidify your knowledge in ways you can't imagine and expose things that you may not be able to predict. Like you talk about teamwork, all right? It's like, that's a huge deal. It's one thing to be an individual who has some knowledge and some skill. That's great, but can you work in a production team environment? You know, how do you interrelate with other human beings? Because in the end, you're not going to work in this business if you don't meet other people, if you can't connect with the other people. I mean, you can have all the skill in the world, but your job potential gets incredibly minimized if you don't have that ability to play with the other humans. And like, for example, having team-based projects, is a massively important thing to get under your belt. And that's difficult to facilitate on your own. And so I think you should just kind of look at your education almost like if you had a investment portfolio. Diversify, use a lot of different things. And yeah, you might have an emphasis in one approach versus another, but I think it's definitely worth diversifying the educational approach for yourself. And the beauty is we have lots of options out there. And I couldn't say that 5 years ago in this business. Definitely couldn't say that 10 years ago in this business.
And just to go back to what you said, to reinforce that is context, right? There's so much information out there, and there's so that having being able to speak with someone, talk to somebody, or go through a class where you actually get that context, because most of it is about knowing what questions to ask. And if you don't know the questions to ask, I mean, how are you going to teach yourself? And that's really the challenge, I think.
So I remember when I was looking for a job, I would read the job descriptions, and they would say, we want someone who knows how to do Wise, who's worked in the Unity engine, who maybe has done some Max MSP or something like that. And so what I would immediately do is I would go and find a bunch of tutorials on each one of those things, and I'd try to learn as much as I could about each one of those things. And by the time I learned anything about them, the job was gone. And then I'd go on and try to look for another job, and then they would have a list of different things that I needed to know to get that job. How would a person trying to get into this industry deal with something like that?
Yeah. So I'll just start this one out. Again, it gets back to I'll just get back to everything you said. You have to teach concepts. You have to learn concepts. Technology will change. Right now, all the stuff that we're using now is going to be either gone or completely different 5 years from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now. So if all you learn to do is to push buttons, then you'll push those buttons for a while, and when they're gone, you won't know what to do. So it's very important to deal with concepts and to understand overall concepts, because that way it doesn't really matter what you're using. The unfortunate catch-22 is that companies use specific tools, and you can, maybe Leonard wants to speak to it, but I mean, you could do the best you can. You can't. It would be quite a job to learn every single tool out on the market. Unfortunately, welcome to game space, right? I mean, there's a lot of tech out there, and it changes a lot. Just one last thing before I pass it off. That seems daunting, but it's also an opportunity, right? Because if you're the first person who knows how to get sound into the thing that nobody else can get sound and music into, you suddenly have something that people want. So it's for every roadblock, it's also an opportunity.
Yeah, the way that I approach that when you have a specific job posting that you're looking into is to basically figure out a way to demonstrate your skills such that it fits the spirit of the posting. So even if you don't know Max MSP, maybe you know Reactor, or maybe you know Pure Data, or maybe you know some other sort of visual scripting language. And so that's kind of what they're looking for a lot of the time, is that they're like, okay, we have this internal tool that we can't talk about, but it's sort of like this. It's like, it's like that, what is it, the proverb about the elephant where you've got this snake and all that stuff. It's kind of like, depending on which side you're viewing it from, they sort of describe it. Our system is kind of like this, and kind of like this, and kind of like this. And so it's difficult to get experience on those actual proprietary systems, and that's fine. One of the funny things is that a lot of the time those systems are actually pretty buggy. So for all the students that I have that are like, oh my God, Unity crashes all the time, or there's so many different versions, or it's so confusing. It's just yes, welcome to my world. So, I mean, that's the thing that I try to impart onto people, is that it's funny, people want to learn stuff sometimes really quickly, and so I try to say oh yeah, sure, you can try and do it in 2 months, but I also allow people to extend as long as you want. But the weird thing that can happen is that I also try to actually teach what they need to know rather than what they want to know. So sometimes that is a learning process in itself. So it's Sometimes there's things that are really, maybe with the job posting, that are kind of like, okay, you want to do this? All right, well, let's try and do this thing. And they're like, no, I don't really want to get into scripting. And I'm like, well, that they listed like Lua in the description, so that might be an issue for you. So if they want to do that, then I'll help them with that. But yeah, it's trying to figure out what the employer is actually looking for, and trying to honor that, and hopefully putting together a way to demonstrate your knowledge as well, so that you're not just saying like, oh yeah, I read the book. Like it's way different when you actually have to do like, a small game, that actually uses that technology in a creative way. It's not just about the technology, but it's about expressing something creatively and telling. If you can cram the story in there, that's great too, because that's a lot of the time what employers are looking for.
Cool. Oh, all right. All right. Let's see. Try to figure out when to do questions.
Do another question and then.
We'll do one more and then, yeah, so we can do that. And we're doing questions down here, is that right?
Oh, you can start just by taking questions with the panel,
We'll go
sure.
up here. Okay. So get your questions ready. We're almost ready to ask these guys questions. And then after we finish with those questions, we'll move down and do the IASIG questions and proposals for new awesomeness to happen. Awesome. So I guess the last question, if this is the last question, what advice would you give someone? I guess the last one was similar to that, but I think we could go along those same lines. Yeah. You're the only one.
I think, and I'll tag team on. I'll piggyback off of what Leonard was saying. Is that there's a lot of different choices. There's a lot of things you can do. So if you have a passion for something specific within game audio and the game audio industry, that helps a lot. So try and keep your compass, right? Because you could chase after the job and then do a bunch of script. Like for example, I've been in the game industry since 1991, and I don't code at all. Every single time someone has said what you said to me, I was like, I know, I should. And then I went and wrote a piece of music, or I did something else.
Your email address is?
I don't code at steve.com, but that actually turned out to be a good thing for me at the time I came in. I'm just saying, I think it's a cliche, but do follow. When you're just starting out and you have a chance to, do follow the things that you find really, really interesting, and when you're passionate about those and do those, that might really be a good payoff. So that would be the one piece of advice, because then we'll get all the rest of advice there.
I mean, I'd say that I think there's just too much to learn, and you do have to focus your time, and it's hard to focus your time. I mean, one of the good things about being at school is that somebody else is focusing your time for you. So it's similar to, I have a gear rule that I won't buy a new piece. I am really bad with gear and plugins now that come into the house unnoticed. So I don't buy something unless I'm going to use it on a project, because otherwise I'm not going to learn it. So the same thing with tools. If I was interested in a job post that listed a tool that I didn't know, then yeah, if I was in between two clients, then I might go learn that tool because I had a reason to learn it. But I find that just for my own learning style, I'm not going to learn it unless I'm really applying it. So, that's pretty much my modus operandi.
How many people have like 800 games on their Steam account?
Yeah, yeah, right?
I've got tons of games I don't even play. So don't buy it unless you're going to play it. I know, right?
Yeah.
Especially Humble Bundles.
I was going to say.
Yeah, just to go off what Janine just said is the best piece of advice I can give you is do a game.
Yeah.
With anybody, anyone else. Find somebody that is doing a small little indie game on a mobile platform or something like that. There's nothing that's going to beat out experience when it comes to somebody considering somebody for a job. You can list all the certifications you've got, all the education you've got. One of the biggest things that they're going to look at is what have you done before. And even if it's just a simple little mobile platform game, you partner up. I mean, everybody out there really needs the same thing. So if your interest is in audio, that's great. Find the people that have an interest in the visual sides of things. Make a little team and just put something out there. I mean, that's again the beauty of things now is it's not like you have to have, you know, all the like distribution and all this kind of stuff. There's all kinds of platforms where you can put something out there. And that speaks volumes to me on a couple different levels. I mean, one is you've shown how you can work in a team-based environment oftentimes through that. And it shows your commitment to the process. And you know, that's something that, again, nothing's gonna trump that experience. You will see all kinds of job postings that said it must have shipped, you know, X amount of titles. Now, a lot of times they're gonna say AAA titles and all that kind of stuff. Just get something out there with your name attached to it that somebody can go download and look at and play. The other thing too is, how many of you are composers in here? All right, a lot of composers in here. You know, I will tell you that for game audio, you've got to learn the implementation side of things. So you know, when a lot of composers are like, I want to compose for films and I want to compose for video games. But if you want to play in the game space, it's not just about making music for, you know, like for example, if you send a demo reel out and it's just a cut scene from a video game with your own music on it, that's not going to sell anybody on you because there's a billion people out there that can do that. What you want to show is that I can actually put my music into a game and I can understand the conceptual approaches of kind of chopping my music up, letting the system reassemble it. Is very important, and that's something that's now becoming more of a prerequisite for a lot of companies that are looking to bring on a composer. They don't want you to just deliver them a bunch of assets that then they have to figure out how to put it into the game in a way that makes sense musically. They want you to deliver the actual, you know, if it was, you know, like a Wise Project sound bank or, you know, some kind of component that they can stick into the game that already has that behavioral element already attached to it. Because while creatively you're going, oh, it'd be really cool in the game, like as the player's health died, like if the guitar lines got louder and louder and louder as an audible cue. That's a neat idea, and you can provide assets, you know, to make that happen. What you want to do is show that I can actually implement that for you using the software tools that you are using. And again, there's all kinds of ways you can go out and learn how to do this, whether it's an Fmod or Wise or any other tool out there, but show that process.
Can I just to say, just because we're talking about this specifically, so I don't want this to sound like an advertisement, but those are the materials through the Game Audio Institute that we use in our classes and that are being used in schools around the country and around the world. So we took Unity levels, we rewired them, and we built very specific game lessons into them. So in some, you just might learn about adaptive sound off of one single parameter as it goes from day to night. Or in, you know, some of our levels, it's just a very simple breakout game, and you'll learn just basics of the Unity audio engine and how to implement a few sound effects and a piece of music. So we've chopped those up into small bunches, because what I've found over the years of teaching is that it's so overwhelming that unless we do that, students just they drown in the amount of information. So breaking it off into very specific, very small lessons that can be implemented into the game engine. And the cool thing about that's amazing, is that so many game designers don't even know anything about the audio system inside of Unity. Now, the audio system inside of Unity is not rocket science. I mean, it is pretty basic. There's a little mixer in there, and then literally over 5 minutes, you can show somebody the audio system in Unity, and they're like, a game designer. This is somebody who's building games in Unity, and they're like, wow, I never even knew that was possible. So there's a lot that you can do. It's obtainable. So that's, to address that issue, that's what we've done with our educational materials, because firmly believe that exactly what you just said. If you're going to look for a job at a game company and you're going to give them a linear cutscene, it's like that's not going to show that you really understand games and interactive media.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it back to just people. I think that the bringing people together is really important. So say from the composer side of things, if you can bring in live players, friends or otherwise, and like if you can show that you're, you know, directing talent, if you're working with voice, you bring in your friends and record them. If you happen to be putting together like a polished, you know, finished piece of something, it's cool to collaborate even with like a video editor, you know, somebody that can really present your work well. If you're, you know, learning stuff in person, it's good to connect with your instructors. It's good to connect with your, you know, the people that are in your classes. Because it's a very small community, and this is really how great things get done. So yeah, working on games, of course, working with a game team is huge. And so those connections that you make, similar to like working in film and other places, is that if you start working with, like a game designer, then often they'll bring you in on other projects. So like you might do just a little thing with them, and then it's just like, oh, actually, like I'm working on a bigger thing, and it would be awesome if I can pay you more, and really bring you in and have a really amazing, basically more credits to show, and just keep building your career from there. So I think that really trying not, because like with computers, you can be just in front of your screen and stuff, but it's really good to reach out in person and to really collaborate and bring that stuff together.
Yeah, really, there are no excuses anymore. If you want to do something, go and do it. We're ready for questions, for anyone who has any questions. Perfect.
Hello, I just want to say it's really wonderful to have all of you here sharing your experience with us. I'm a professional voiceover actor, and I've got a bunch of crazy voices in my head that have to get out every now and then, thankfully. Otherwise I'll go mad. But my question is, do you feel that it's important to have, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but this is the question. Do you feel that it's important to have representation, or that you just represent yourself as an independent in terms of seeking work?
That's a tricky one. Actually, not so much with voice talent, but I've been helping a friend of mine that has been working for several years in indie game music. And I would say that with the process of working with him to work with an agent for the music side of things, a lot of it is matchmaking to try and figure out the right agency for you. It comes down to money and business. So it's like, it's good for you to have a portfolio of stuff that matches up with their roster or like fills a hole in their roster. So I would say that it takes a bit of time, but when you're just starting out, I think that it could be kind of difficult, because it makes, if you're an agent and you're like, well, this person just came out of high school, and how are you going to do that? So I think a lot of it is getting together very strong material and probably paying to get professional help with that, either recording or getting the website, all that kind of stuff. Making a lot of calls, like actually phoning people.
When you say phoning people, you mean studios?
Well, it can be agencies, it can be people in the industry. The thing is that, we haven't gone through a lot of stories, but everybody, I think, in games has a different story. So it's kind of like anytime that question of how do I break into games, my answer is usually like, well, just increase the amount of possibilities, talk and network with as many different people, because you'll never know, the seeds that you plant, which ones will grow into something. So it requires a lot of work, and sometimes it can be a lot of luck. I can't really give you one answer, but I would say to basically, put your heart into it and put a lot of time into it. Sometimes it will take money, and it will also, hopefully it'll happen, but who knows? So I think that it's good to work with an agent if you have the materials that they're interested in. But other than that, it's good to build those materials in the meantime.
Yeah, I'll say the agent thing is always a question, and it really does depend on what kind of work you're hoping to get.
Sure.
I did have an agent for a pretty substantial portion of my freelance career as a composer, and then at some point I didn't want to be vying for the types of jobs that agent wanted to be pushing.
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The difference between the art
Yes.
versus the commerce.
Yeah.
I understand we all need money,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, but we do. But there's that fine line that because I've had representation in the past, but it's just when you get sent out to things that you just don't believe in.
Yeah, so I do think, I have friends who have agents and they get along very well. And it's not that my agent was somebody who I didn't get along with. It was just that through my own exploration of my own career, I realized what I wanted to work on, and the types of things I wanted to work on did not require an agent. Now, yes, if I wanted to work on the next Marvel game, I'd probably need an agent.
Even
That's,
then.
yeah.
Even then.
Yeah, so, but that just wasn't, so I think there's never a right or wrong answer, it's just where are you in your career?
But in general, an agent is there to negotiate the deal for you.
Of course.
They're not going to get you work. You
Yeah.
know, I came out of scoring Super Size Me, and I got an agent in LA, and I'm like, yeah, this is great. I introduced him to more people than he introduced me to. And then at the end of the day, he's like, I'm going to get you some trailers. I'm all like, I'm the audio director for Nickelodeon. I don't need trailers.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so agents are, it's yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much for your talk and for all of your educational efforts and endeavors. It's really appreciated. I am a graduate student and a teacher at my institution as well. And what I find in not only my classmates and students is that people are unbelievably creative when it comes to sound design, composition, but the barrier seems to be with the tech aspect. And it might be twofold, I think, that one, coding is never really talked about when you're growing up as a musician. And another part is that in my school, the music technology department is completely segregated from, say, the engineering school and another school where the actual game design is housed. And I was wondering how, as educators, you think that the audio team and everyone else can kind of come together, and if you have any strategies for that.
Yeah, can I ask you just a couple questions before I give you an answer? So you're currently teaching audio production, and now you're teaching games as well, or
No, I go to school for game design and game
Oh, you
audio.
go to school.
Yes, and I also teach there as well. I teach the undergraduates audio engineering.
Right. And there is a game design school at your school.
There is a specific game design school, but there's actually no audio for the exception of a few classes.
Of course.
The audio classes are taught in the music technology department.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you from what's happened at San Francisco State and a couple of the other schools that I've taught at. So, I walked across the campus with using my legs and met the chair of the computer science department and said, you know what, we should do a collab, right? Because you've got a bunch of game designers here who are working on stuff. And I had taught for a little while at UC Santa Cruz, so I called them up and I said, hey, would you like to collab with our students? I will assign audio leads to them. It will be a class. And they're like, that sounds like a good idea. So you have to actually go and make those connections or ask your teachers to make those connections. You know, I always find that we can only do so much, but when the students go in and talk to the administration and say, we really would like this to happen, that it really speaks super loudly. But it's connections that have to be made, and it is a mystery to me that they teach game design without considering sound. And that is something that needs to be changed. Like, for example, there are some students sitting in the audience right now. They're in the middle of a collab right now with computer science. And it's really amazing to throw them into those teams as audio leads, because it's in the middle of the semester that I'm looking at them and I'm like, you don't even know how much you're learning right now. And you won't even appreciate it till you get to the end. So it's absolutely essential that at some point, at least I think so, and you guys can express that, at some point in game audio education, probably towards the end, after some skills, or it can be at the beginning, I've seen it both ways work really, really well, that you get thrown in the deep end and students have to work in teams and become part of a team to really understand what that's like. So you can encourage that at your school. I hope that's a helpful answer.
It is. Thank you very much.
And there might be others.
Oh yeah,
Speak
I'll just
to it.
add a little bit to it, because I started out more so doing programming, and I'm doing more, soft and squishy stuff now. And what I try to do when I'm teaching sort of the implementation side of things is just sort of seeing it, I sort of see code as like another language. It's a foreign language. It's the language of like logic, but it can also be very, very creative. And so it's kind of like, being a writer and like trying to write a novel sometimes, but you can also just be writing a pamphlet. And so for people that are not used to code, I try to say like, well, let's just do some like digital finger painting, you know, like because a lot of the times people are worried about breaking stuff. It's just like, no, you know, with the code side of things, it's the same as anything else. Just try it out and see what happens, you know. These days, it's unlikely you're gonna get a segmentation fault. You're gonna be just fine. There's lots of like, you know, the sandbox sort of approach. It's just like, here's some things, try these out. And you don't need to be fluent in code. What I try to introduce people to is just like, look, here's a small phrase book, and you can just learn a few phrases, and this will allow you to add your sound into, like, you know, C#, into Unity. That's just like, you know, there's like, you know, 10 different sort of things on the screen, and like just change those around and see how that works. And it is really amazing to see some people that really fly at that, and some people don't, and it's a process of caring, of just to say like, look, that's totally fine. But I think that the idea is to basically, the underline is to try and break down those walls, and to try and bring disciplines together that are actually not that different.
Well, thank you guys for your questions, and can we have a big hand for our panel up here?